Alrighty guys, welcome to another episode of Dynamic Discipleship. I'm Seth.
Yeah, and I'm Devontae.
And we're back again with you guys this week. This is a video blog designed to help you think about and question and hopefully grow your relationship with God.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of special guests on the show so far, and we are looking for some more. So if you have a particular topic or a particular character or something about the Bible that you'd like to discuss, you'd like for us to discuss, please leave a comment, let us know, message us, and we'd be happy to talk to you about getting on the show.
Yep, absolutely. With a small fee, of course.
Well, you know.
Wouldn't that be something we start charging people to come up here? How many people do you think we can get by doing that?
I don't think we can get anybody to
Yeah.
pay for it. But that's not the point.
Yeah.
Anyways, today we are going to talk about Esther. And kind of like you were talking about earlier, it's been a while since I personally, and I guess since you've been in Esther and talked about Esther. I actually bumped into somebody and went to school with somebody named Esther. And it's like the only time I've really ever heard that name. I know it's popular in different parts of the world, but me personally, I know one Esther. And I have started doing daily and weekly studies from a study guide, a couple of different old study guides that I have. And this week, my study guide is on making a difference, and it gives a lot of specific examples from the book of Esther. So I said, hey, Devontae, why don't we read the book of Esther and just kind of talk about it and see what kind of conversation we can go from there. So that's what we're going to do today. I'll let you kick it off if you'd like.
Sure. Have you seen One Night with the King? I think that movie is based on Esther.
Okay.
I haven't seen it, but I heard it was good. So that might be something that maybe some of our viewers have seen, or if they haven't, is worth checking out, because I heard it was really good, and it's based on it's a retelling of the story of Esther, set in biblical times. And I don't know when the movie came out, but I don't think it was Hollywood produced either, because Hollywood they be tripping sometimes when it comes to biblical stories. So I don't think it's Hollywood produced. It might have been one of those straight to DVD kind of movies that came out, but I heard it was good, so that would be a good reference point, I guess. And it seems like it's pretty accurate from what I've heard. But starting with the book of Esther, I'm gonna be real with you. When I was thinking about the book of Esther, I was thinking, okay, what book of the Bible is her story in? And I was like, it didn't occur to me that she does have her own book. And I was like, wow, that's pretty good. It's not very long. I believe it's 10 chapters. But it's definitely very rich, and there's a lot in it. I jumped in, and I was like, it really surprised me, just some of the revelations that I was taking away from that. So just jumping into some of those. Esther 2, this is one thing about Esther that really is special about her character. It shows her character. In Esther 2, basically, just to give a little bit of background. So Mordecai, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. He's kind of, what is his relation to Esther?
I was getting ready to say, can I pause you for a second? I want to rewind a little bit.
Go back.
Okay, so I'm going to take you guys all the way back real quick. Is it Xerxes? Who are we talking about?
King Xerxes.
Okay, King Xerxes is the ruler, and King Xerxes is super rich king. He's all about throwing him some parties and some banquets. So King Xerxes throws a party. His wife also throws a party, and King Xerxes says, hey, somebody go get my wife and tell her to come over here. I want everyone to see how beautiful she is and how awesome and fancy she is. But they were drinking a little too much, partying a little too hard, and she said, no, I'm good. I don't really want to go to his party because I'm just going to stay over here. And he didn't like that. He was kind of upset about it, and his boys started getting in his head. And they were like, dude, you can't let your girl just say no. You can't do that. When king says you do something, you're supposed to do it. If you don't deal with this, then all of our wives and all of the women everywhere will start just being disrespectful, defiant, and not listening to what their husbands say. I know the whole equal rights stuff, but we're just going with what time period here. And so they had him write a decree and kind of tricked him into saying that that all women had to do whatever their husbands say. So that was kind of the first time that it was like the man is the head of the household, like not in biblical terms the head of the household, but in terms of like the man's got final say and like what he says goes. And then in addition to that, they said we can't let her live because she'll just keep spreading that example. So they killed her. After a couple of months, the king started feeling bad about it and like, yo, my wife is dead. I mean, he had lots of other wives, but I'm assuming this was his favorite wife since he was letting her throw her own parties and stuff too. And they said, don't worry about it. Let's have all of the tribes send their best women who are not married and who are virgins, and we'll get you a new wife. And it's not like in today's times, it's not like I can just be like, hey girl, you want to go on a date with me?
Yeah, it's not courting, no courting at all.
Right. Yeah. So in this time, especially with the king, this is actually a 10-year process. So all the girls from all the tribes had to come and be presented. Then they lived for 5 years in like a training to be presented to the king, and then the second 5 years is spa treatment. So it's like prep and like learning how to walk and put on your makeup and bathing and doing all this stuff and like getting you prepped and ready for the king. And then they get presented to the king, and the king picks out who he wants. So this is kind of the process that's going on. There was a family of Jews that did something that disrespected 2 kings before Xerxes. And so they got kicked out of the city. And the king was so mad, he said, even when the next king comes in, you're still kicked out. So when Esther was born, like, she wasn't even allowed to come in. Her parents died, and Mordecai is her uncle and adopted her and raised her. And so Mordecai, being part of the family, is not allowed to come into the city, but still has to send her in. And so she gets sent into this camp to go through this process, and she ends up being the one of the group of girls that gets picked that the king likes and wants to get married to. And so she becomes a queen at that point in time when the king picks her. She also, to give you a little bit more reference on the side with Mordecai, Mordecai is actually, when he offended the original king, he was part of like that king's court, and he said something that the king didn't like. And then now with King Xerxes, there was a plot to kill King Xerxes, and Mordecai overheard it and went to the king and was like, hey, or went to some people and was like, hey, I heard these people talking about they were going to kill the king. They checked it out and saw that it was true, and so he kind of got good graces back, but not like, nothing was done about it. It was just kind of like, okay, cool. At the time, it was kind of like, cool. We acknowledge you. Thank you for saving the king. You're no longer like a horrible person.
To be continued on that part. And that's what I wanted to
And then that's where you pick in.
That was a great setup.
I just wanted to let people know what we're talking about.
that background was great. That was a great setup because I'm going to be real with you. I didn't read back that far.
Hey, that's cool.
So that was a great setup for my next point. So the plot you're talking about to assassinate King Xerxes, he found out about it. Mordecai did find out about it. He told Esther, actually. She told Esther. And so Esther is the one that went to the king. But here's the point. Here's what I really like about what Esther did. She could have taken credit for herself. She could have said, I found out about this plot or something like that, and then she could have taken credit for it. But it specifically says that in verse 22 of chapter 2 that Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai.
Okay.
And that's what's important there.
Yep.
That's what's important. She didn't take the credit for herself. That shows a lot of integrity. How many times have you wanted to take the credit for something that somebody else did or somebody else told you?
Yep.
It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of honesty and integrity to actually be like, as much as I want to receive the credit for this and the reward for this, I have to admit that this idea, this solution, whatever it was, if you think about a work situation or whatever it is, like this came from somebody else, and I have to give them the credit for it. And so as a result of that, it says all of this was recorded in the book of annals in the presence of the king. Back then they had kings, anything dealing with the king, you know, things like that, it was logged in.
Yep.
It was logged. So thinking about like today, like some political leaders may have, you know, certain conversations recorded, like in the Oval Office or something like that. I think I heard about how sometimes they keep tapes of their conversations.
Even in the court of law.
And in law.
If you go in front of a judge, there's somebody over there scribing everything that's said.
Exactly. And that comes into play later, so we'll definitely explore that later, why it was important that it was recorded. But first of all, I would like to start with just commending Esther's incredible heart to have honesty to give Mordecai the credit, her uncle the credit for uncovering the plot to assassinate King Xerxes. So that really shows.
Because she's a queen now.
Yeah.
So she didn't even have to associate with him anymore.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the first major takeaway that I had, just integrity.
Yep.
And that's one way that we can make a difference as well. So, what about you?
I kind of wanted to move forward from that. Is it Haggai?
Haman.
Haman. Thank you.
He's the bad guy.
So for this purposes of this discussion, Haman is the evil villain.
He's the bad guy.
Okay. So Haman is one of the court officials. I believe he's the second highest court official other than the king.
Yeah.
And Haman he doesn't like the fact that Mordecai sits by the gate. He doesn't like that. In those times when you're a high official, when you come into a room, when you enter or exit, or when you're walking, everybody is supposed to kind of worship you. They show respect, but it's a little bit more than a showing of respect. It's supposed to be like that they bow before you and they grovel at your feet. And being a Jew, Mordecai didn't do any of these things. He didn't fear what this guy was doing. And that really irritated him. He was like, well, who are you? You're a nobody. I'm this great person. You're supposed to be afraid of me. You're supposed to like worship me, and you're not. And it was really irritating him. It irritated him to the point that he went to the king, and he was like, King, there's a group of people who live in your province, who live here. They're called the Jews. You got a lot of different kinds of people living here. But all the Jews have a different set of laws. They believe in a different God, and they have different rules. And because they're following these different rules, they don't respect your rules, and that's going to cause them to like overthrow, basically, because they don't abide by the same laws that we abide by. And so he said, what I'd like to do is just kill all the Jews, and that way there won't be anybody who has a different set of rules than us. And the king said, you know what? We got a lot of people that live here, so if that makes you happy, go ahead and kill them all, because whatever. And so a decree was made. It was put in law that, all the Jews were going to be killed. But to prove a point, it was all going to be done on one day, like all of the Jews at the same time. And so they held a event to see what was the best day. They came up with a date and said, okay, put this on all the letters and send it out to all the kingdoms. This is the best day. We're going to kill all the Jews on this day. And so all of this was done purely because Mordecai was Jewish, and this guy didn't like the way he wasn't scared of him. And so when Mordecai heard about this and he saw the proclamation that everyone in his race was going to be killed because he didn't want to worship this dude, like he was really upset about it. And like he ripped off his clothes and put on a potato sack and threw ash in his hair.
Sunday morning back then.
Exactly. It was a sign of mourning. It was showing honestly, it was a back in the day version of a protest.
Basically.
And he wasn't allowed. You're not allowed to go into the kingdom like that. So like he had to stand outside the gate and just lay on the ground and be sad and cry and scream. So it's like, I don't want you to tear this tree or, you know, knock down this building. I'm going to chain myself to this building and scream and cry. So, you know, kind of a revelation, you know, comparison there. But Esther saw him out there and saw him crying and mourning, and so she sent somebody and was like, hey, find out what's up with him. Why is he so sad? Why is he upset? He explains everything to the servant and says, you know, tell this to Esther. The servant goes and tells Esther and comes back and says, you know, Esther says, you know, here's some clothes, don't be sad. What can we do about this? And for a little bit there, Esther's kind of like, well, it's not my problem anymore. And he responds to her and he's like, don't think for a second that you're above this. Like, when they find out that you're Jewish too, like, they're going to kill you, or worse than that, they're not going to kill you, and God is going to come in and take revenge for the wrongdoing to the Jews, and you're going to get caught up in that revenge because you didn't stand up and say anything.
That's powerful.
Right.
If that doesn't change your mind, I don't know what will.
And so Esther was, you know, she was scared. She was like, I don't want them to kill me, but one of the rules was you can't talk to the king unless he asks for you.
Right. If you approach the king in his court and he doesn't extend his golden scepter to accept you, you can get killed on the spot.
Right.
So anytime you approach the king, you're taking a risk. Like, he can choose to not extend his scepter and accept your presence.
Exactly.
And if that's the case.
And especially being one of his wives. It was, you know, kind of going back to the whole, like, doing what the king says, doing the man being in charge, you know, because he had multiple wives, like, they had turns, and so it wasn't her turn to be his favorite or be in his presence or whatever. But she took the risk. She said, okay, you know what? I'll do it. And if I die, I'll die, but at least I tried. But I'm not going to stand by. And she went and she presented herself to the king, and the king was like, it's Esther, I love you, like, what can I give to you? I'm so happy to see you. And she said, you know what? I want to honor you. I want to have a banquet. I want you to come to my banquet. I know how much you love parties. Let me throw a party for you. And you know what? Why don't you bring, blanking on his name. Haman. She's like, why don't you bring Haman? And Haman can celebrate with you. And so, you know, the king and Haman go to Esther and they have this big party, and the king is so happy, and Haman is happy because Haman's like, oh, I'm the man. Like, it's me and the king just chilling with,
like, of all the people in the world, she invited me.
Exactly. And so, you know, when the king gets there, he's like, all right, I know you didn't come see me because you want to throw me a party. What is it that you really want? And she's like, well, you know what? Tomorrow I want to have another banquet. Come to this banquet, and at the end of that banquet, I'll tell you what I really want. But first, I want to make you happy. Which is a great tactic. Like, you can't just start asking for stuff. Sometimes you gotta, like, get people in a good mood and butter them up a little bit.
That's her smart. That's another part of her character. Being shrewd.
Exactly. And so, and I'm kind of just keep on going with the story. So anytime you want to cut in, you let me know.
Yeah, I got some things I want to go back to, but let's finish out the story.
Okay, so we'll finish out the story. So then Haman is leaving, and he sees Mordecai again, and he's just so irritated. Like, this dude is just still there, and he's still here, and he's still not bowing down. And I don't think my level is to that, but I know, like, sometimes I get like that. Like, when I see somebody, like, on the side of the street, and I'm like, I see this dude every single day asking for money, like, and I've given him a hamburger, I've given him money, and I'm like, and it does, after a while it does, honestly, it starts to irritate me when I see the same people doing the same thing and I don't feel like they're helping themselves. Not to the extent that he went to. He was like, let's build a gallows, and he talked to his friends. He's like, I can't be happy until this dude is dead. And so, like, they, like, built this thing 75 feet tall, and they were gonna hang him.
What do they call that again? They called it a it's essentially it's like
it's
a
a gallows, like a hangman's.
Yeah, because they say to impale somebody on it. Because I want us to explore that a little bit more because there's a lot of irony in that.
Okay.
It's just a pole,
Yeah.
you know. So Mordecai's dream, and he's telling this, not Mordecai, Haman is telling his, I guess, associates.
Yeah, it's his
that-
wife and his associates.
Exactly, his inner circle, that his dream is basically to build this really tall pole. I think it literally said 60 feet.
Yeah.
I don't know when you need to go up that high, but I guess it's just so everybody can see it,
Yep.
and just like to make it a public statement. And he wanted to impale Mordecai
Yep.
on that pole
Yep.
as a statement. So keep that in mind. That's an important plot point. We want to come back to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Proceed.
Yeah. And so he goes to ask permission from the king, like, hey, like, there's this dude, he's part of that Jew group, but like he's irritating me. Like, I want to kill him
Yeah.
because of these reasons. But before he gets to ask the king, is it Esther who brings up about the about Mordecai? I think it might have been one of the court officials.
About Haman, what Haman is doing?
Not about what Haman is. So I want to say it was one of the court officials brings up the fact.
Oh, what Mordecai did previously.
Right.
Yes, that was one of his.
So one of his court officials, like, because they all are seeing him out there mourning and doing stuff, and the king inquires, like, what's up with this dude?
Yeah.
And they are like, oh, that's the guy who saved your life a couple years ago when you were going to be assassinated. He's the one who was like, hey, somebody's going to assassinate the king. And the king was like, oh, well, did we do anything for him? Like,
Exactly. So,
did we have a party? Did we give him a medal?
Right.
Did we do something?
That's in Esther chapter 6. So the king was, for some reason, he couldn't sleep. I thought this was funny. It says the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of Chronicles.
That's
the
right.
record of his reign to be brought in and read to him. So that's kind of like, imagine if you can't sleep, and some people did turn to a book, some people turn to Netflix. Back then, they didn't have Netflix.
Right.
You know, they didn't.
Let me just
you couldn't
read
flip
this
the TV
list
on.
of all the good things that have happened.
Because he's like, okay, this is going to put me to sleep. And then he happened to see that what Mordecai did in the record that we talked about previously. So that record of Mordecai warning about the plot to assassinate the king, he now sees that in his reading. And then he's like, did he receive anything for this? Did he get an award? And then they said, well, no, nothing was ever done for him. And this is the part I really love. I'll let you.
No, go. Tell them the part you love.
The part that I really love is Haman comes back into the picture again, like this guy. So the king calls Haman, and he basically says, he brings Haman in, and he says, the king asks Haman, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? So the king obviously wants to reward someone, and Haman starts thinking that it's him. So Haman thinks it's him.
He's going to give me a front. Man, this is what I want.
Exactly.
I want to ride through town
He even
on the
says that.
king's horse.
We kind of, the Bible gives us a little inner picture into the thoughts of Haman. Haman is saying, now Haman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? He's like, well, it's got to be me. Like, who else is going to be? So he starts listing off all these things that he wants. Like, I want a robe. I want the horse that the king has ridden and all this stuff. He's like, yeah. So the king is like, okay, I got you. I'm going to get all that. And then the king is like, no, all of that you just suggested, go and give that to Mordecai, the Jew. And I would pay money to see the look on Haman's face in that moment. He's like, yo, you cannot be serious right now.
Like, I'm here because I'm about to ask you, can I kill this dude?
Exactly.
You want me to ride him through town on your horse?
That is a humbling moment right there.
Yes.
That is a big humbling moment right there. So I just thought that was pretty funny that happened.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, Haman runs away crying. He's a little crybaby. He goes back to his wife again and starts talking about how he wants to hang Mordecai again, you know. So I just thought that part was pretty funny. It's like poetic justice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh goodness, sorry. So on some of, let's hit some of those points, I guess. Do you have points for the rest of the story, or your points are for the beginning of the story?
So let's just finish. There's a little bit of an end to the story again. So
finish them out.
The end to the story is basically that. So like as you built up before, the Esther invited the king back again to another banquet. And this time she's going to reveal what she wanted to ask for, because the king is just dying to know what is it that she wants. And so she finally reveals it. She says she puts up, and this is another thing that Esther's really smart at. She doesn't immediately accuse Haman, because if she said Haman is trying to kill all the Jews, the king could have been skeptical. He could have been defensive about it. Say, no way, I trust him. So what she does first is she says, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. and spare my people. This is my request.
Yep.
For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have been quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. So she's saying that, like, if they were going to just sell us as slaves, I wouldn't say anything. But
Right.
the fact that they're basically going to kill
Execute us all.
yeah, I was like, I had to bring this to your attention, even at the risk of my own life.
Yep.
So obviously, so setting that up is brilliant, because the king's first thought is, who is doing this? Like, who is it that is threatening to destroy you and your people? You know. So she kind of, there's a turn. It's kind of like, it's a psychological thing for her to kind of not play the victim, but she actually is the victim here.
Yeah.
She's letting the king see that my people are being victimized, and I know that you love me and you care about what I care about.
Yep.
So me and what I care about are being victimized, and we are at, our lives are at stake, basically. So the king's response is going to be, well, who's causing this? Then Esther says, an adversary and enemy, this vile Haman. So long story short, the king is upset.
Yep.
And the same pole that
You
Haman
want to
built,
kill my wife?
exactly, like, he got real then.
Like, what?
And the same pole that Haman built to impale Mordecai, he himself ends up being impaled on.
Yep.
And that's a statement, and that's essentially, there's a few more chapters here, but essentially, the king also issues a decree to save the Jews. So Esther and her people and Mordecai are now all safe.
Yep.
So the Jews have been saved, and that was the final request that Esther made to King Xerxes.
Yep.
And so the story has a good ending.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't tell you a depressing one.
Yeah. It's a good ending.
But yeah, no, that, like, I don't know. There's so many different directions we could go with
so
this.
much to unpack.
So much to unpack here. Obviously, we don't have hours and hours, so we're gonna have to revisit at a certain point in time.
Yeah.
But as the title of our story, making a difference, one of the things that Mordecai says, and that you can see in the story, is that, you know what, like, maybe Esther was put in that situation for this from the beginning. Like she obviously had decisions that she had to make. Like, am I just going to kind of follow this path and try to, like, blend in, or am I going to take this chance and let the king know, like, hey, I'm a Jew and the Jews are about to be killed, and I want to save myself and I want to save my people, and all this kind of stuff. And even the fact that, like, she was even still loyal to her people after 10 years of being in the courts and the king's system and stuff like that. I mean, she could have easily just been like, no, I'm not a Jew, like, and, like, nobody would have questioned necessarily.
Her people. Yeah.
Okay, I wrote down a couple that I wanted to ask questions. First question was, I wanted to point out and talk about how did Esther display courage. And we kind of talked about that a little bit already, but like, it was one of those things where she was putting herself literally in a life or death situation.
Literally. Yeah.
And I think that was really courageous of her. And I don't think there's anything necessarily that's that big for me to compare to myself. But in the same way, I want to stand up for what's right. I want to do what's right. I want to help those who are less fortunate myself. I want to help people who are who have afflictions or who have something against them. And so I would like to hope that I have the courage inside of me to say, you know what, it doesn't matter how far I come, but I still want to look out for the people who are where I've come from.
Absolutely.
And so that just kind of, that's one of the, not really a question, but one of the things that I wanted to say.
Absolutely.
Another one was kind of, I wanted to point out the reward and consequence for actions and not knowing what that is. Because Mordecai spoke up about the plot against the king, like, we don't even know if Xerxes was a good king or not. That's not even important. It's not even talking about that in this passage. I mean, we can look back in history and see other things, but from this passage, we don't even know if he was a good husband, a good king, like, if he was nice to people. Like, it just seemed like he was, like, kind of apathetic and was like, well, if you want to kill these people, I guess, like, they're not helping me. And like, so he wasn't against them, but he wasn't for them. And so Mordecai spoke up and was like, yo, some people are going to kill the king. And he didn't do it for a reward. He didn't do it for anything. And he got nothing for it for years. But then, you know, it was recorded. And, you know, people, the king specifically, looked back at that and was like, yo, you know what? We need to do something to honor this person. We need to do something. And I feel like God does that.
Absolutely. I was going to go the same route.
Yeah, I feel like God does that. Is like, you know, when we do things His way, when we speak up, when we talk to other people, I mean, it's so many different directions. Like planting seeds. Like I might talk to somebody and it doesn't happen immediately, and you talk to somebody and it doesn't happen immediately, and somebody else talks to that person, and it could be years and years and years. And then, you know, I've had people who are now Christians and who've come back to me now will tell me, like, I remember when you did blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I forgot I even did that.
Just right there in memory.
Right. And so it's just one of those things where it's like every decision we make has a reward and a consequence. The bad one was Haman, like, he built this tall stake and these gallows and trying to kill him, and he was so upset for no reason about trying to kill this dude because he wasn't worshiping him, and it turned around on him, and like he ended up being the one getting killed. Yeah,
and isn't it just such an analogy for just hatred and bitterness, unforgiveness? Like, think about it, like, what stakes are you building in your life for somebody else that you might get hung up on? Literally, well, not literally, but figuratively. I was like, yo,
we're not in you.
We're not in these times anymore, but figuratively, are you building something to harm somebody else that could wind up harming you? You know, that's deep. That's deep.
So a question, throwing you on the spot here for a second. Do you have an example of a time that God honored you when you made a difference?
Wow, that's a good question.
Right.
When I think about my personal experience here, so God honored me for making a difference. Okay. I mean, I think in general, like, I try to see myself as making a positive difference, you know, in various ways, whether it's my family, the workplace, the church, things like that. In terms of a specific instance where I was honored for making a difference, I would say in general, let me think here, for making a difference. Okay. I like using some of my, like, earlier years. I can think of a ton of examples now.
Okay.
But one that stands out to me in my earlier years, being in high school, I think, I was in high school at the time. So this teacher gave me an award that I was not expecting.
Okay.
I don't remember the name of the award, but her name was Miss Vines. It's Aubrey Vines at my high school. And in high school, I tried to do my best I could to help people. So what I would do is, like, sometimes there were certain classes, and I don't mean this to brag, but it's just a fact. Sometimes in some of my classes, I would be doing so well that a teacher would basically say, Devontae, like, you don't have to study during this time, because sometimes they'll give us study time. They're like, I want you to help other people study. I want you to help
teach other people.
Yeah, help teach other people, or just, and if it's, or for a project, like, instead of you doing this, Devontae, just help somebody else. So, and I did it willingly and things like that, and I did it for multiple classes, but I never expected a reward from it. But sure enough, you know, my teacher basically, it was like a banquet. It was outside of the school, and again, I really wish I remember the name of the reward. I still have it somewhere. But she basically awarded me. She rewarded me for it, and it was her speech that is something I will never forget. And keep in mind, this is before I was a disciple. You know, before I was a true disciple. And this really, I harken back to this moment because I believe that this is the time when I really started to seek God more. She basically told me, she was like, one of the things, she said a lot of different things about me in her speech, but one thing that she said I will never forget is that when I see Devontae, I see the heart of Jesus in him. And the funny thing is, at the time, I didn't feel that way. Like, I'm a high school kid. I'm pretty selfish. I just want to go to college, and, you know, like, I'm pretty self-centered, you know, at times, you know. But for her to say that, it was kind of like calling me higher and being like, I felt that was God's way of also calling me higher and motivating me to actually have the heart of Jesus, you know, like. And I think that's a great coaching lesson as well. Like, when you want somebody to do something or be a certain way, even if they're not it at the time, call them and treat them as you want them to be. Think about Gideon. You know, God calls Gideon, you know, a courageous, bold warrior, And Gideon feels like a coward, you know, and he's fleecing God and being like, God, if you really want me to do it, you know, make this do up here and stuff like that.
Try that towel.
We talked about that
wet
before.
that towel.
Exactly. We talked about that before. But I think that was a moment that God used that moment to reward me for making a difference. Whether I knew it or not, it was a difference. And I can think of countless other times in my personal life, even recently now, where I've made a big difference. I think I've made a big difference in other ways. Another big example is, as you know, my fiance lives in the Philippines, and she's incredible. She makes me better, and like just me being able to go to the Philippines and be a part of that culture, I feel like I've been able to help make a difference there as well. We serve together in Hope Worldwide, which is kind of like an organization, a charitable organization for children that are less fortunate or orphans. And I've been able to make a difference with them. And for me, my reward is just when I see and hear about just how they're doing over there. Every now and then, the coordinator of the Hope Ministry there will send me pictures about the smiles on the kids' faces, that the lives that we've touched and things like that. And I'm like, that in and of itself is a reward to know that these precious little children that God loves and adores, I'm able to make a difference even, while I was there, and make a continual difference even while back here in America. Just things like that are also rewarding for me. It's kind of like those little reminders that God wants me to be encouraged, from the good things that we're doing, and whether you get a reward for it or not, good things are always worth doing. And sometimes God can give you a reminder that you are making a difference with those things. So,
And I also, that's amazing. I love those. I also want to point out to our audience, it can even be on a small scale.
Absolutely.
Like doing what you're supposed to be doing at work, and you get a raise.
That's making a difference.
That's making a difference. Like, so like you have positive examples, just like Hope Worldwide with your fiance, like the award that you got, but like also even just seeing like in the little things of just like you talk to somebody and somebody who maybe is feeling lonely and now they have a friend, or somebody's depressed and you've invited them out, or different things like that. Like you never know all the little ways that you can make a difference just by speaking up.
An act of kindness. And a lot of times these things are things that, like you said, we don't see the immediate impact. And sometimes, let's be real, some of the things that we do, we might not ever know the true impact of what it was. We might not ever know if you give somebody money on the street or something like that, or if you just have a kind gesture towards somebody at work, or something to help somebody out. We may never know. That person may never come back to us and thank us for that and tell us, no, like everything you did, this is the impact that it had. I just want to thank you for it. That didn't even happen with Jesus one time. Think about the lepers that he healed. The 10.
Everybody pieced out.
Nine
one
of them
person.
left, and you never heard back from them. Only one person came back. So it's the same thing for us. Like we may never know what the true impact of our good actions are, but there is a record, like you said, and God is the one that's keeping that record. And that in and of itself is worth knowing.
Beautiful. Beautiful, man.
I had a few rapid fire kind of ways.
Fire away.
And I'll try to get through each of these quick, but going back to how you beautifully described just Mordecai, his situation with Haman, think about, how many times in life somebody wants to get rid of somebody else because they don't agree with them. I mean, I don't even have to give examples, like fill in the blank, I mean, we're seeing that happening now. So I just thought that was another very relevant thing in the book of Esther that's still relevant today. Just the human instinct and the nature of wanting to get rid of someone, maybe not literally, but basically just to cast out and reject somebody because they basically have a set of traditions or rules or whatever that is not aligned with yours, or maybe you're not getting
racism, sexism,
sexism, and
everything.
Things like that. Just xenophobia in general. Just people being different from you, and you saying that doesn't benefit me. I don't like it. I don't agree with it.
Somebody at work who's doing the same thing that you're doing, but they're not doing it the way you want it done.
Exactly. The list goes on and on. So that's one thing. And the last thing, I was going to do like a few of them, but this one takes a little bit more time. Mordecai's call to Esther in Esther 4. Wow. I mean, so basically Esther is being called out in a way by Mordecai, her uncle.
That's true.
And because basically Mordecai's obviously wanting Esther to use her influence, to convince the king to save the Jews. Esther is like, she has a valid response. It's that I could risk my life by visiting the king without his permission. I could really risk my life. I could end up dead because of this. So then Mordecai comes back and is like, don't think that even if you don't do this, that you're, immune to what's happening here. Like, it could be happening to you. So think
you could die anyway.
Exactly. You end up dying anyway, like you said, like you put it. And like, think about the times when you have the position or the opportunity to make a difference, but you don't. that can end up hurting you as well. Even if it's on the behalf of somebody else, it can end up hurting you to not act on the behalf of somebody else. So think about the situations in your life where that is also relevant. So Mordecai's call to Esther is a call we have to make to ourselves sometimes, and if we don't, sometimes other people will call us out. Yep. And hopefully they do it in as loving and as firm as a way as Mordecai does it, because I thought that was a really cool call to action that he had to Esther, and that's in Esther chapter 4. I was reading that and I felt convicted myself about the times and I didn't use my influence to make a good difference on behalf of somebody else. So yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Gotta think through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel good about that. Feel good about that. Guys, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up this week's episode. But thank you for watching, and we will be back with you guys next week?
Yes, next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. We're going to have a special guest with us. We won't spoil it right now, but you'll have to come back and see. We got some special guests coming up with us, so that's going to be fun. Yeah. We will post some of our questions along with some of those correlating scriptures if you guys want to look into that. Yeah. I highly recommend reading the book of Esther.
Absolutely. We
paraphrased the book, but it's actually a really good read.
It is.
Short book, 10 chapters, really cool story. Depending on what version you get to hang people or stake people or, different kinds of things.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But thanks for being with us, and we look forward to talking to you guys next time.
Yep. See you all soon.
Peace.
Nice. That's good.